Welcome to the Monsoon Academy Podcast, a transitions research initiative where we aim to help you map your climate career journey through conversations with diverse industry professionals across the sustainability landscape. You will hear from seasoned experts who have worked on addressing climate issues in South Asia about what their day-to-day work looks like, what kind of skills you will need to be a competitive candidate for those roles, and to see the kind of opportunities that are out there. Let's make the future green together. I'm your host, Shanta Venugopal. Our guest today has been working towards bridging the gaps between climate research and action through impactful storytelling. He conceptualized and created the multi-award-winning short documentary series Faces of Climate Resilience and co-created a first-of-its-kind art and climate initiative, Sustaina India, with a focus on integrating sustainability conversations into the cultural fabric of India. Currently, he is a communications specialist at the Council for Energy, Environment and Water, but his trajectory started very differently, with a master's degree in economics. So how did he end up here as a climate communicator? Let's hear from him now. Welcome, Mr. Milan Jacob, to the Monsoon Academy Podcast.
Hey Shanta, thanks for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. So I'll kick us off with our first question. How did you get here from this first attempt at a master's degree in economics to then the eclectic world of climate communications?
I think the very simple answer is purely by accident because this is not something I planned or a career in climate is not something that I was even aware of growing up, right? I think my core skill is storytelling, or that's what I think I'm the best at so far, especially visual storytelling, I would say. So, like you mentioned in the introduction, initially I did a master's, an integrated master's, in fact, in economics. I went to the University of Hyderabad. It was a 5-year program. But I certainly learned a lot more outside the classroom there. It was a cultural melting pot. It was the first time I was meeting people from all across the country and getting exposed to so many different types of cultures. So that place definitely shaped a lot of how I see the world today. After economics, I went on to pursue journalism. The motivation behind that was my interest in photojournalism. I then started my career as a journalist after a year with Hindustan Times in Delhi. So while working with Hindustan Times, I think about a year into the job, I started pursuing a master's course in anthropology through distance education. Uh, Again, the factor that drew me there was visual anthropology. So I think visual is a common connection that you might see in both these decisions I've made in my life earlier. So yeah. So again, visual anthropology and a lot of curiosity about what this whole discipline is about, because that was a part of one of the master's programs on offer when I was doing my economics master's back in University of Hyderabad, but I wasn't really aware of what anthropology was. So anyway, I was pursuing the course along with the job at Hindustan Times. It was a super engrossing course, very interesting. So at that point, my plan was to apply for a PhD program abroad in anthropology. So I was speaking to a lot of my friends who were pursuing a PhD, whether in India or abroad at that point. And after a few of those conversations, that is when I figured that's probably not the best option for me, because even if I went on to do a PhD, I didn't really see myself in academia. So then the general sense I got from people was that if that's not the goal, then I might as well work and gain experience rather than spending a good amount of time, effort, energy, and all that mental bandwidth that a PhD would take and invest it elsewhere. So that's when I started applying for jobs, especially in the development sector. I wasn't too keen going back to journalism. The process took a while, but eventually I started working in communications in a USAID funded public health project. Uh, this is not something I planned to do. This again happened by accident because I had applied to a programs role with this same project and they had a communications opening and they just offered me that because I think, again, my background in journalism and the fact that was the immediate previous job that I had done. Stepped forayed into comms very accidentally that way. And as that project was coming to a close, it was a time bound project. I was again looking out for new opportunities. And that is how CEW, the organization that I currently work at, it's the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We are a Delhi based public policy research think tank. And yeah, after the public health project, that is how I ended up at CW.
So today, now as a climate communications expert, what is your day-to-day work like? Is it what you expected, or could you tell us about some of the unexpected challenges or rewards that have come since then from this job?
I joined CW to handle digital media that comprises social media, website, all things digital that way. But given the interest I had in visual storytelling, I got to do some video projects as well on the side, especially snackable video projects and things like that. So there were different opportunities that would come by, whether it's with a new research project that CW is coming up with, a new study that is launching, or to respond to something that is topical in the climate and sustainability space. We might come up with a new explainer video, etc. So those were some of the things I did earlier. But recently, I've transitioned to a new role. This is where I'm trying to create projects which are more public facing and can mainstream the discourse on the planetary crisis. At the heart of it, we want to tell the climate story in a more engaging, entertaining, and inspiring fashion. So I'm also trying to build a lot of collaborations, partnerships, etc., that can help to advance this goal as well. This is a new initiative. This is a new vertical that we are trying to build at CW. But yeah, for like I mentioned, for the initial four plus years, I was working on the digital space exclusively. And along with digital, I was also working on a lot of data storytelling projects. I was overseeing the work of an in-house data analyst and information designer. She's a trained data journalist. So we work a lot together on data storytelling projects as well. Currently, my day to day in this new role would range from, let's say, writing new concept notes for projects or calls or meetings with potential and existing partners to discuss ongoing projects or to pitch new ones. It could be coordinating with the finance and legal teams on budgets and contracts with partners and agencies or finding out some of those details. And of course, working on data storytelling projects or gamification, gamified explainers, and things like that.
So, would you say in some way you ended up right at that intersection of your interests between media, journalism, communicating data, making them accessible, engaging, gamified for mass communication?
Yeah, I think yes, I've been lucky enough to get into a mix of all of these things. And that way, CW also lets you experiment with things, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples of projects that I worked on in the last 3 odd years. So one of
Yes,
them is
please.
called Faces of Climate Resilience. It's a 16-part short documentary series that captures the stories of climate vulnerable people from different parts of the country. The stories highlight how people are coping at the grassroots level and coming up with solutions, how they are adapting to the entire climate crisis using whatever limited resources they have or their traditional wisdom, nature based solutions, etc. So we traveled to 5 states and captured these 16 stories. And the base of it was also research that CW has been doing on climate risks and how the pattern of extreme weather events like cyclones, floods, droughts, etc., are changing in India or have been changing in India over the last 50 years. So, using the granular data, we narrowed down to what are the states and districts we can go talk to. But then we didn't want to look at it from a doom and gloom perspective. We wanted to approach the issue from a more hopeful arc. So that is where the all the videos speak about how people are coming up with their own solutions or how they are adapting. So that's also in a way showing climate resilience at the grassroots level, right? And this is a project on which I work for easily about 2 years. And this is something that I did when I was doing the digital role previously. So I got to work on this on the side. So I wrote a concept note, then we pitched it to a funder, and then luckily it aligned with some of the research that we were doing as well. So then the project turned out to be quite a success. It probably also bridged a certain gap that was out there in terms of stories from the ground, but more from a hopeful narrative perspective, because typically it's all otherwise, like I said, a lot of doom and gloom and news around climate and what is happening in that space. So that is one example. Another one is called Sustaina India. That is, you could say, a first of its kind platform at the intersection of climate change and art to inspire collective action. This is a project that CW co-conceptualized with this eminent artist duo Thukral and Thagra, who are very well known in the contemporary art space in India and internationally as well. So the two, CW and Thukral and Thagra, came together to create the space where we could nudge emerging artists to come up with projects that are speaking about reimagining a habitable future, right? So in the first edition, there was a fellowship program in which three fellows were mentored over a period of 6 months, and it culminated in an exhibition which happened on the sidelines of the India Art Fair earlier this year. And the exhibition ran for about 2 weeks in Bikaner House. So, apart from the three fellows, we also had the work of a few invited artists as well. Largely, we were talking about, like I mentioned, reimagining a habitable future, but looking at the aspect of materiality. You're talking about everyday materials and how a deeper connection with some of those materials can themselves actually help you understand a lot of what is wrong with the way our lives have become these days. Yeah. So these are, I mean, beyond the day to day, I think it's projects like these that give more joy. They're more time consuming. Sometimes you have to do it alongside, existing other projects and your day to day stuff as well. But then over a period of time, this is what is really rewarding. And probably even when I look back a few years down the line, these are the things that I'll really remember, not maybe some of the other social stuff or the website stuff that I did for the longest time for that matter.
It sounds, especially as we're talking to a young audience wondering about their climate careers in the future, that you really have to grab these opportunities to find joy in your work and also find, hopefully through luck and hard work, this intersection between all your interests and funding opportunities and also finding these artists to collaborate with. What are some of the skills that you think young people can cultivate to really juice these roles for all that they're worth that you found really interesting, either on your team or even within, that have helped you move forward with all these passion projects and make that your livelihood as well?
So within the team that I'm currently in, it's a mix of people. There are people who've got a journalism background. There are people who are maybe graduates in, say, English literature. There are people who've got a marketing and MBA background that way. There are people who worked with public relations firms, etc. So it's a mix of people serving various purposes within the team. There is a team that specializes in publication, design, etc. So while we've built a team with a certain set of skills internally, we also tend to work a lot with external partners and collaborators because that is when you can do things at scale. So I think beyond your skills, then project management is highly important. And it's, I think, also important to know how to multitask and maybe try and step in and help others in some other roles as well. So even in terms of skills, you can have a set of core skills, but also I think pick up new things and try and do that skilling all the time because that is absolutely critical going forward. I don't think you can be reliant on a single skill and then achieve everything that you want to. So that is also when you can grab some of these opportunities that might come by and really immerse yourself in some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's great about what you're saying about these skills and being able to upskill on the fly as well as getting these opportunities is really good to be at organizations that allow you to thrive in that way and learn from each other and take on new projects. So, in that vein, I'll ask, did you have any support in terms of mentorships or sponsorships or launching factors that really boosted you forward? And how did you find them if that's the case?
I wouldn't say mentorships per se. Wherever I've worked so far, I've been fortunate enough to work with really good people or people who've been really helpful or wanting to help you in your career. So I've been fortunate to be in those spaces. And I wouldn't say it's one mentor in the current space I'm working in. The structure is such that you can walk up to even people in the senior leadership roles and discuss your ideas or brainstorm with them. So it's a very supportive and enabling environment overall. So I think that also plays a big role in terms of what you can come up with or the type of ideas that you can conceptualize because that enabling environment I think is very key. Mentorship is one thing. For some people that route is very helpful. For me, that's not something I've very actively sought. I think it's more important to work with good people with the right intentions or who align with the way in which you think or who've got similar ideas. And that it's also important to have opposing viewpoints as well. That is when you can truly balance and come out probably with the right project. But then, yeah, I mean, that overall enabling environment and that space for teamwork and to learn things out of failures, I think those are some of the very important factors that have helped me, because I've always experimented. It's not like I'm trained or I'm extremely good at any of these things that I've done. Those are all things that I've picked up on the go, learned through mistakes I've made, and that's how I've got here. So I think every project makes you better and tells you what not to do the next time. And that's how I move forward, at least.
I think you've definitely already touched on this answer just now, but I have to ask, do you have any advice for people who are trying to work in these types of roles or who are just starting out? If you could give them one nugget of wisdom, what would that be?
So, see, when I was in school, something like this is not even a career in public policy or in the climate space for that matter, is not something I was aware of whatsoever. All that I knew about was medicine or engineering or law or the civil services, as most kids in India would know at that point in life. But the opportunities are way beyond that, and I think the only way to get there is to keep your mind open, be, I think, willing to explore things, be willing to learn new things, pick up new skills. Because, and again, I'm reiterating that picking up new skills part is something which is all the more important, because you never know when AI is going to make your core skill redundant, right? So it's very important to keep picking up those new things and keep upskilling. And I mean, beyond that, there are a lot of very specialized courses for you to get into public policy or research about the planetary crisis or climate and the environment existing today. So all of those academic options are there, but then training is one part of it. A lot of it otherwise you learn by doing only. So I think really immerse yourself in what you're doing and see if what you're doing is giving you joy. If that is not the case, then at least for me, it doesn't make sense to keep doing that. So I think that balance between what gives you joy and financial security, and if you're really able to propel yourself forward in that way, I think that is very critical.
That's extremely helpful to hear. And I think even based on what you've described in your own career, it clearly shows that each skill had its part to play in the projects you later took on, and especially the ones you imagined up yourself in terms of concept notes and things like that. So thank you so much for speaking to us today. And hopefully, we'll be helping people through this podcast to get more access to roles like yours so they can learn from people like you and integrate those skills into their lives. You've been listening to the Monsoon Academy podcast, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. In the meantime, please write to us with any questions or comments and tell us what climate careers you might want us to cover next. See you next time.